Pilot Boys in the building. Welcome to the Pilot Boys podcast, where you'll get the real on all things sports, music, and pop culture. I'm Mack here with my co-host V.
Mama mentality for life.
Today is May 14th, 2020. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We are still quarantined and social distancing due to this coronavirus pandemic, but we're still going to figure out a way to bring you content at all costs. So please bear with us. On today's show, we have a very special guest, former Ohio State wide receiver and current New York Giant, Austin Mack. We talk about everything in his life from his days at Ohio State, differences between quarterbacks he's played with, what the New York Giants can expect from him, his relationship with Gary V, and much more. We'll also do some news and notes of some popular sports, music, and pop culture stories from around the country, including the NBA, MLB possibly returning, Verzuz battles, and man, a lot of RIPs. Shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Remember now that our Patreon subscribers will get our episodes on Wednesdays, a night early. These donations help keep our show going. If you want to help keep us on air, you can donate at www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys Podcast. And don't forget to grab some wristbands, shop.pilotboys.com. Let's go.
Where the Pilot Boys at? Pilot Boys, we get on up. We don't fly, boys, we getting up. So Pilot Boys, we get on up.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys Podcast. We have a very special guest in the house today. Former Ohio State wide receiver and now New York Giant, Austin Mack. Austin, what's up? Welcome to the show.
What's going on, Mecca and V, man? Appreciate y'all having me.
I see that quarantine beard is growing just like mine.
Man, it's getting nice.
For sure. So let's jump right into it, man. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the draft, obviously, and kind of how that went in that process. Obviously, you're in New York now. Talk to us a little bit about that, like just, what that process was like and how did you end up in New York?
Yeah, man, it was a stressful three days. Obviously, ever since you left Ohio State, it's just the combine training, go through the combine. You hope that there's a pro day, but for us with the pandemic and what Rona's been doing to everything, it kind of pushed everything back. So it's kind of, you're still training. If it's possible, try and get a virtual pro day in for some, but at the most, just try and stay fit, healthy until combine came. It was so up in the air for a guy, especially like me, who were, not guaranteed top, 3-round guys. So it was kind of just up in the air. You didn't know what team you're going to go to or who really had interest. So, it was different.
And how stressful was that? You had the NFL Combine, and after the Combine, you probably fully anticipated also having a pro day to kind of find that out. How was that? And how did you take that? And how did you just manage that part of it as well?
Yeah, man, but mostly just trying to stay at peace and really fine tune, just knowing that I can only control so much, right? And just making sure I'm doing the most that I can with what the opportunities that I'm given, and no matter what, just believing that it's God's plan. I'm gonna be good either way. So, just excited for what's to come, and just being in the now, knowing that right now it was either training, right now it's either go to the combine, or right now it's just trying to stay quarantined. So, just like that.
And after the draft, you ended up in New York as a Giant pretty quickly. That was announced not that long after. Talk to us about how that process and in terms of choosing what team you ended up going to.
Yeah, so, I really, my agent was the front runner with trying to speak to teams, and came down to, I think in my terms, a really good fit. And, I'm just excited to be a Giant and excited for the future.
Yeah. One other question, too, about just Ohio State receivers in general. Obviously, not having, like you said, a pro day, I think, hurt a couple of you guys, with Benjamin and obviously KJ. I don't think any of you guys kind of went where we think you guys should have gone in terms of just like value. But I think you guys all ended up in good places. But why do you think generally Ohio State receivers get slept on? It's not just this year. I mean, Terry went in the third round. Mike Thomas went in the second round. Guys that we feel like their value isn't as high as it should be. Why do you think that is?
I think the draft and everything is more of the media-led story. It's kind of what the narrative is around you. A lot of our guys at Ohio State, man, we're tough, we're dirty, but I mean, we're not going to have flashy stats. And it's going to be, especially after that 2015 year when it was 2016 with JT in that full room. I mean, there's just so many guys. I mean, so many guys with a lot of talent. So it was, really a rotation, but everybody just wanted each other to be successful. And there was no we didn't really care about anything else. I mean,
right.
In the way that the room just ran, even the coaches, it's not like we want to get somebody 1,000 yards or this person so many yards. It's like, what can we do the most for the team? And what's better to know is that the Ohio State receivers that they do take, I mean, they're balling. So no matter where you at, like, I mean, we got a good resume of guys that are doing pretty well. So I'm pretty confident, that it'll continue on. So that's what's most exciting.
And you mentioned like just how deep the receivers room was. Like all of you guys coming from high school to Ohio State were used to being the man, right? Like the ball was going to you every time a QB dropped back. But with Ohio State and the multiple receiver sets, does that get challenging at times? Because you want, in high school, it's like when there was a play, the ball was coming to you. Going to college and knowing there are multiple other guys who kind of have that same feeling, and it's got to get spread out a little bit.
Yeah, so like coming in, man, I didn't. My sole purpose was to start. I wanted to get on the field as much as possible. So like I never had any desire to like, I need to get the ball. I was out there for one or two plays. I was happy if it was the last couple of things against Army, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And older you got too. I think it's just the culture and the type of coaches we have that just instilled in us this unselfishness that, man, sophomore, junior year, I really didn't care. Like I was just like, I'm hoping we all eat. There's plenty of times where my junior year when, Johnny and Terry were playing the Z position, there was times where Terry had a touchdown. They were about to call another play for the Z to score. He pulled himself out, put Johnny in, and gave him that touchdown. Like we got multiple stories like that where, it's just this unselfishness in that room. Now, when I got to a senior and, obviously personally, this is when I felt that the most. And I was really having to gravitate towards Terry, Johnny, and Paris when they were going through it. Because when you're a young guy, you got another year. You're not really thinking about it. But when this is your last year, this got to be your money year. I had started the season off with a couple of hamstrings. So I was already late to the ball game. Then get into the season, and you might see one or two balls, but we're beating the hell out of teams. So it's like we're only playing a half. So it's not like there's a ton of balls going around, and we're running the ball really well. So there was a point in the season where it was like, man, I'm frustrated because these stats isn't going to get me drafted. But that's when I had to talk with Terry. That's when I had to talk with everybody, my old heads. And it was really just letting them know that it's going to be good no matter what. They know your talent. They know where you're coming from. And they know your situation. So it was more of just being okay with that and, like, accepting my role as a team and as a leader, that's not the type of vibes that we need to have in the receiver room, being a leader and being an older guy. So definitely challenging, but it was definitely something to go through. Sorry.
So overall, it seems like you how do you kind of sum up your career at Ohio State? Because I think personally, I feel like, you're one of the best receivers that I've seen especially in terms of route running that's ever come through Ohio State. I think that, obviously given the amount of different receivers that we had, and then also some certain injuries, you probably didn't get to produce like you would like to. But when you look back, how do you feel about your career?
Oh man, just overall, when I think of my career, man, I'm super thankful and blessed for it because, one, making that decision not only got me to play at Ohio State, but the amount of people I met along the way and me just developing as a man overall, and getting my degree is what I'm most proud about. Like, you know, if everybody wishes they could have 1,000 yards, score multiple touchdowns, but in reality, the trials that I went through and the struggles I went through, man, in the long run, I'm more proud of because it's changed me and grew me into something so much more.
Tell us a little bit about having a major injury, right? Like when you're younger, you're not necessarily thinking like that, and then for the first time, you have a major injury where you just can't play. Like, walk us through that, like the mental aspect of that, as well as the on-field part of that, knowing what you're capable of, but that you're just physically limited and you have no control over that situation.
Yeah, that was so I broke my foot. That was in Purdue my junior year, and I was having a decent year. Even possibly might have thought there was conversation about even want to declare if the season finished off good. To it just abruptly stopping, and when it comes to when you love something so much and you think this is everything you want, and for it to just get taken from you, like just as a man, like there'd be times where I'll be sitting in my room and I'm watching the Maryland game at home in bed that year, and we're losing, and I'm just sitting there mad, just mad. And it's like this internal struggle, this internal fight was like, I didn't know what it was. And there was a time where I really told myself, I said, all right, I got to figure out what's up. Cause like, who are you? Like football ain't going to last forever. So for you to be acting like this or feeling like this mentality, it ain't healthy. And the injury and anything like that is so real. And for me to just been so blind for it, I'm glad it happened then and not,
right.
You know what I'm saying, in a couple of years. So
right.
This is one of the that was probably the hardest thing I ever had to go through in my life was that 6-7 month period. But man, incredibly strong from that.
Yeah. Talk to us too about another issue that we haven't really mentioned yet in terms of kind of at least some of the, I don't want to call it struggle, but some of the issues that you had to deal with at Ohio State. You dealt with multiple different quarterbacks, right? You dealt with at least from JT and obviously Dwayne Haskins and then Justin Fields this past year. Talk to us a little bit about the differences between them and what the offenses were like with those guys.
Yeah, so JT and Justin are very similar. Guys that are, we call it that 12 or the 11-man element. Usually when you have a pro-style quarterback like Dwayne, it's 11 defenders against 10 offensive players, because the quarterback's never really a factor. And with Justin and JT being able to run, man, it makes things a lot easier because you're able to do a lot more. And that's something that Coach Meyer really wanted to hone in on. With having Coach Day and that new evolved offense coming through, especially when we started with Dwayne and then moving forward, man, it was so fun. Obviously with Dwayne, we threw the ball a lot more than we did with the other two quarterbacks, but at the end of the day, it's just whatever you need for the team. So being a quarterback guy as a receiver, you want to be friendly for everybody, just being able to be in your spot. That's the number one thing I did. I didn't care if it was, Corey Curtis or, anybody. As long as I'm in my spot and we're able to make that connection, that's easy. We just have to make sure we have that communication. The only time Justin really had me was on my nerves was that first week, and he was trying to throw 100 miles per hour, ball straight at us. Like, hey, bro, calm down. But
right.
But no, man,
what's the ceiling? What's the ceiling for Justin? What's his ceiling?
I ain't gonna I ain't gonna make no standards for him, but man, he's a super talented dude, and I think there's a lot that he can grow in. Being a guy that played with him and has played with like a JT coming in, I seen like the elite to Dwayne becoming, an elite, and seeing where he's at, he can grow a lot, and I'm super excited for him when it comes to his raw passing ability, then also being able to scramble. So he's going to be very elite.
Speaking about your skill set for a second, what do you think are the attributes you have as a receiver that put you in the best position to succeed as an NFL receiver? Obviously, you haven't even fully scratched the surface of your potential yet either.
Yeah.
But what do you think are your strongest attributes of your position?
Right. Like how you said earlier, Mecca, man, just a great route runner. Fine-tune that gift, knowing that I'm not going to go out there and run a 4.2, so I'm not going to blaze by anybody, but defense has to run just as fast as me, and I promise you I'm going to stop faster than you and get to the ball. So just being able to have great routes, great feet, and then also just being knowledgeable of the game, making and knowing where the defense is going to be, so it's easier for me and not less strenuous.
Right. When we look back at Ohio State, like your time period that you've been there, pretty much the last decade, obviously since Urban got there, there have been a lot of special talent that's come through there. I mean, it's ridiculous, and so, as a fan, as a former player and as a fan, we look at things differently than people who are actually in the locker room. And one question I have for you is, did you realize, I mean, obviously you just are fresh out of Ohio State, but did you realize how special it was, like every day in practice, how special it was what you were a part of?
I didn't really understand that until my senior year. There was I think it was either in camp or going into camp, coach challenged us to, create a goal. It doesn't, maybe it's call your mom every day, or maybe it's, brush your teeth. I mean, whatever goal it was for you, right? Create that goal. My goal was to learn everybody's name in the facility and be able to make that interaction. I was in the training room so much that I knew every training staff, plus all their assistants, plus the cleaning people that came in. And I was able to see Ohio State and the structure from everybody that helps me just be able to go out there and play at my best. And it's a humbling thing. And being able to say that they care about us, really understand that they care about us so much and about Ohio State, that's really what it means to be a Buckeye. And you don't really know that until you're in there and you're with them for that amount of time. So that's really cool, man.
I mean, I think the world pretty much knows how special of a place Ohio State is as far as a football school, right? But I think what's kind of very special about you is the advantage you took of the opportunity it creates for you off the field, right? As well. You mentioned your degree, and you also started an organization called Ross. Can you just take us into that a little bit in your experience at Ohio State as a student as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, it really just came from, my freshman year, sophomore year, going through school and football, and there was nothing else. There was no more substance. And to me, I just feel like you need more to life than just, your football and your school. Like, there's 60,000 students at Ohio State, and I only know maybe 2% because I haven't been able to just expand my horizon. There's so many people with talents, hobbies, passions, and Ohio State's like another city amongst its own. And it's just being able to find that. So one of our advisors with Sasso would always put together these nice little meetings on Sundays where some of the minority kids, male athletes, would just come together. We'll chop it up, you know what I'm saying? Have something to eat. And there was one day where it was, I think it was 2017 summer, where we was like, let's make this into something, because one, the access, the reach that we could do, and a lot of the positive we can come from it. And we did. There was about 9 founders of us. We put it together, created an organization called Redefining Athletic Standards, which the goal is basically to bridge the gap between, athletes and regular students, to create more opportunities for athletes to find success and opportunity, to not just be athletes, but to give them a why, which I'm a full believer in, and to just give more business opportunities to these kids and create relationships. There's a lot of things we've done. We would do a lot of events that were more specific to athlete schedules, because most of the stuff BSA or all these other, they're on a Wednesday night or a Saturday, during the day. And it's no athlete can make that, especially football players. So one of the coolest things to me is that I used to know all the football players, but I didn't know none of the track players. I didn't know our track runners. I didn't know none of the soccer players.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even know we had a fencer and a gymnast. But now I know all these other people, and
Right.
and to me, that's the coolest thing, being able to just create something organic, another brotherhood, that's all student led on campus. That was, a lot of fun, and it was, I think, very beneficial.
Well, one thing we always liked about you, is that you thought outside of the stereotypical box, right, of an athlete. And, you actually learned a lot of this stuff and started implementing some of this stuff in college. A lot of guys who actually do realize that this is, there's more to life than football, they don't start till much later. But it seems like you already started early. And I guess along those lines, you also kind of have an idea, maybe not fully fleshed out, but a kind of goals of where you want your life to go and other things that you want to get involved in as you progress in your career and even beyond. Talk to us a little bit about some of those things. What are some of the things that you are going to be looking to do as you continue to grow in your career and beyond?
Right. Yeah. I'm really passionate in group economics, entrepreneurship, private equity. So let me put that in a little easier term. Group economics basically is the fluctuation of money within a community. So I'm big into understanding. I came from the south side of my town in Fort Wayne, and I always had to go to the north side of town to the malls or the west side, and those neighborhoods are the suburbs where all the nice things are at. And so for me, I want to be able to create a system where you're able to not see a difference in economic structure. That's my end all be all goal. But also, I'm big into entrepreneurship, ownership, being able to, own something, grow it, and then see it fruition. And that goes right in hand with group economics. You want to have people who want to own markets, who want to own the stores and everything that helps put a community together. So big in also the real estate. I think that's probably one of the best assets that you can have. Land, there is more, can't create no more land. And
right.
I think,
right.
You understand what increases the value of land. I think you can, make a pretty decent profit off of that as well. So I signed with Vayner Sports, and I think Gary Vee, who's the owner of that, man, he's one of the best venture capitalists in the country, which is starting up a business. And he's extremely smart in what he's doing. And I'm trying to eventually learn off of him and their access and their relationships to help grow myself as a businessman and a pro. So.
I think the group economics thing is fascinating to me, because it's one of the things that I always kind of talk about. Is it's like we always glorify individuals, right? Becoming rich and becoming successful, but it's completely different, a different mentality to think about. I want to advance a group of people with me, not just my own self-interest. I think that's powerful. And I just wanted to kind of hear what inspired you, or who inspired you to start thinking along those lines.
Man, it was really just more of my own struggle. In 2007, like a lot of people, my family hit from it worse. My pops, worked for FedEx, a company FedEx, and making $15 a week, which at the time was great. Would go to Toys R Us whenever I wanted as a kid, and could have any game, right? To then him, becoming unemployed and everything disappearing, to almost having to be on the street. And that's when I'd really start to, fine tune and understand about, like, hey, like if you don't pay your rent, you won't be able to live here anymore. Because when you're a kid, you don't know anything. You're just living there, right? Yeah. And I started just learn these little tools of, housing and living and this and that. And I'd see the neighborhoods where it's easier to afford to live and where it's harder to afford to live. And I always had these questions. And as I got older, I had, great mentors, like Mike Lito and Jay Muhammad were my mentors from Fort Wayne. And they eventually put a word to it, and that was group economics. And they instilled in me a lot of this business-minded, curiosity. And I've kind of self-taught myself a lot of it and really read into a lot of, great entrepreneurs and businessmen. But that's really my story. So.
That's great. Let me get back to a little bit of football stuff before we get you out of here. One question that, I just think Buckeye fans probably want to know the answer to is, you actually got a chance to play with Urban Meyer and also under Ryan Day. Talk to us a little bit about them and what are some of the differences between them as coaches?
Yeah. First off, both great men, just great people, individuals. But they're both on the opposite spectrum of coaching.
Right.
It's honestly, it's crazy. But Coach Meyer was more of a guy who was very direct, very loud. I mean, sometimes you'd be pissed off at him, but you got to bite your tongue and move on.
Right.
And Coach Day is a little bit more logical, a little bit more less forego, but more give you a chance, make your mistakes, and then come talk to you. But he can still get after it. Don't get me wrong. He can still get after it pretty much. But Coach Meyer really used fear tactic at its utmost, while Coach Day was a little bit more, I wouldn't say lax, but not as, up there. So
right. And then last question I have for you is just talk to the Giants fans. They're obviously Ohio State fans and Big Ten fans, and even beyond that, no Austin Mack, but maybe there are a lot of Giants fans who haven't been exposed to you yet. Talk to them a little bit. Tell them what type of player it is that they're getting and what they can expect from you, as your continues to go.
Oh, yeah, no doubt, man. Just a fighter, man. A really good overall football player. Excited to be in New York and to be around, that company of that excellence of that organization and club. Really just trying to, first and foremost, know what it's like to be a pro, learn what it's like to be a pro, and take it day by day to eventually make that team. That's my goal right now, starting today. And they're getting somebody that's going to, do everything he can for the team's success. So.
Yeah, and wanted to circle back for a second also because you mentioned Gary Vee earlier, and now you're going to probably have more access considering you guys are both in New York. Right. He's a well-known Jets fan, of course, but just tell us into your thought process of picking him and why he was inspirational to you and how your conversations with him have been. Man,
they've all been really good. As soon as I decided to go with the Giants, he said, "Welcome to New York." So nothing, no envy yet or any beef yet with them. But
right.
But man, G's a brilliant dude. It's still kind of I really don't get starstruck or usually have issues asking questions. But that's one of them dudes where you respect his time so much and who he is that before you even want to talk to him, you got to make sure you come correct. So every time I do, man, it's always he's very humble and he's always full arms and giving me a complete response. And when it came to making that decision. I just think when you're looking for an agent, it's more of the agency rather than the agent. An agent can only do so much. And when you go with an agency who has the access, who has the marketing ability and all the things that Vayner Sports has, man, I just think you can't go wrong with it. So I'm excited to keep learning from him as the years go and see where this venture goes. So excited.
Well, that's awesome, man. I guess it's going to be different, man. This obviously, as fans, we're like really missing sports, and we're hoping that we can get back to it. And we're obviously really excited for you and in your career, and we hope everything works out for you in New York. So definitely keep us posted. And thank you for joining us on the Pilot Boys podcast, man.
I appreciate you, Mack and V. Take care. Man. Stay safe.
Love the Pilot Boys podcast? Support us on Patreon. Supporters can pledge as little as $1, and we have some cool perks on there. Check out www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys podcast. Show us some love today. You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast, episode 28. Time to hit some news and notes. You ready, V?
Let's get it.
All right, man. This is actually kind of crazy. We're going to start with some RIPs, man. There are some very important people kind of in popular culture and then also in music who passed away recently. Now, one of them is Andre Harrell, founder of Uptown Records, who was responsible for so many artists that we know of today. Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, he found Puffy, who obviously found Biggie, Heavy D. I mean, the list goes on and on. He died suddenly, apparently of some heart problems. What were your feelings? Obviously, not just about his death, but about kind of who he was and what you knew about him in music.
Well, I mean, obviously, it was very, very surprising. It seems like in an industry full of bad people, he was able to maintain his integrity and be kind of a bastion of light, right? Mm-hmm. Even how he approached business and how he handled the Puffy situation, who was working for him at Uptown Records, and realizing that he was preventing him from blossoming. So letting a talent like that go and telling him to go get rich, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
yes,
right.
The number of people's careers that he's responsible for, and as a result, so many moments he's created for all of us, both in music, and then also I found out he's the creator of or played a critical role in the creation of New York Undercover.
Not surprising. He was also in the group Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. So
as well too.
When you factor all those things in, and just, you know, the fact that he just created so much talent, and also, like I said, maintained his integrity and personality, and then also stood up for minorities, right? Because it's also Uptown Records was also kind of the blueprint that many indie minority-owned labels like Rock Nation and Bad Boy used to follow, right? So yeah, it seems like everyone has something positive to say. I mean,
that's the thing that strikes me the most, I think, is, you know, typically when someone famous, or anyone really, but particularly someone famous passes away, you'll obviously hear the good stories, but then you'll start hear all these people come out and say negative things about them. And that this is like one dude, especially in this industry, this is one dude where everybody's stories about him are solid from day one. And the reason why that's impressive is because you realize in this industry, and you and I know this, that you will have opportunities to do shady shit at different times, you know, or not necessarily even shady shit, cutthroat shit, or shit that people aren't going to be necessarily happy about.
That will advance your career, right?
Right, exactly. And he didn't do that. So obviously, I think he lives by a wife and kids. So, you know, R.I.P. to Andre Harrell. And his legacy, like I said, his legacy is going to live on for as long as we live, as long as our kids live. Really as long as possible, because there's so many different people's lives that he influenced. And what's crazy was pretty much that same day, Little Richard passes away. So obviously, R.I.P. to Little Richard. He's older, but still, it still hit kind of like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, and I feel like, although it hit at the same time, I feel like what I'm seeing in the media, we're not paying proper homage to who Little Richard is. Like, he is the creator of rock and roll culture. I don't care what anyone says. His personality, his energy. I think Paul McCartney actually said that he copied everything from him, right? And the Beatles, actually, when they first started touring, the Beatles, who are considered the biggest group of all time, were opening for Little Richard, right? And I think another person who I think was in an industry full of just negative energy was someone who was always positive and offered positivity to the culture.
Yeah, and you know, you see things like NBC News, I think, or maybe it was ABC News. One of them posted something like "R.I.P. to Little Richard, the self-proclaimed, catalyst of rock and roll, or king of rock and roll, whatever." And you know, they got slammed for it because, you know, like people were saying, basically that headline presumes that he wasn't that, and that. But then I read an article in the Times earlier, and they were talking a little bit about his life and how, like, the latter part of his life was almost dedicated to this continued proclamation, because people would not give him his flowers for whatever reason. People would not acknowledge him. Some people did, but a lot of people didn't acknowledge him as the, you know, creator of rock and roll, or even a substantially significant contributor. And so he would trumpet that a lot, and it almost became a parody in a way, or kind of became a caricature in a lot of ways, because, you know, he would have to do that and people would almost forget about his actual contribution. So, but for those of us who know, and those of us who are being honest, which again, you know, we talk about honesty a lot. We know what he contributed, and we know that people stole his stuff, and that's fine, because that's what happens in music. But we will make sure that his legacy and people that really care about it will make sure his legacy is definitely upheld properly.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then not the last, but I guess another pop culture one is Jerry Stiller. Ben Stiller's dad passed away. Funny dude, man. Obviously don't have as much to say about him as some of these other guys, but he definitely contributed a lot to some funny moments for us.
Yeah, I mean he's hilarious. Obviously, Ben Stiller's dad, but just between all the shows, you always remember him as the dad, right? Or the fun, and he is just always hilarious. And no matter how bad your day was, if he came on the screen and made one of his jokes or said something, he could instantly change your mood, right? And
that's true. Absolutely.
There are very few people that could do that, and that's definitely something that we have to remember him for.
For sure.
A nice life.
Yeah, he did. And the last RIP, not to say that there weren't other significant people who passed away, but the other one that's running kind of the stories is the Arbery story. Yeah. And Ahmaud Arbery essentially was the guy that was gunned down due to acts of racism in Georgia, and it's not even really a debate. I mean, there's some people that are trying to show that he might have entered a construction house and was looking around or some bullshit. You know how they always try to do. Yeah. But the biggest thing for me is that about this is that I just pray that he gets justice, because when you hear the arrest, a lot of times you hear, first of all, these guys should have been arrested months ago, but they weren't. Mm-hmm. And now they finally are. And, some people are going to relax. But if you know and understand this justice system and how things work in this country, the arrest that's not the be all end all. It's not even the trial. It's the conviction. And then what are they being convicted of? So
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty, I hate to use this phrase, but it's fairly black and white, right? Probably the best way to put this is this guy, and the other thing that kind of bothers me about it is finding out the background of the shooter, right? The fact that he was in law enforcement, was a police officer and an investigator for the prosecutor's office definitely makes you wonder why charges weren't brought earlier. And then also questions like, okay, this guy was in law enforcement for years holding these types of beliefs about people, and then actually also executing a human being. Like, there was absolutely no reason, regardless of what was happening, for them to shoot and kill this kid.
And the DA was, or prosecutor, apparently she's a friend of this guy or the dad, and had told police, who I think wanted to make an arrest. They told police not to, and they suppressed it basically for months. So I think if you look at it from beginning to end, I think it's an indictment on a lot of things that happen here in this country, from the beginning to end, from how the feelings that are being harbored initially, from the actual, gun death and killing itself, all the way to, them not being arrested, to the cover up, to them finally being arrested, and then to now, the ultimate act will be whether there's a conviction or not, and we'll see what happens with there. But either way, we definitely want to say R.I.P. to Ahmaud Arbery, and condolences to his family.
Hopefully justice is served. And one other R.I.P., of course, is Betty Wright. We missed that one earlier.
Oh, yeah. Miss Betty Wright, absolutely. R.I.P. to her. Very famous singer. And, she contributed a lot to the culture. I think she was 66 when she passed away. So R.I.P. Betty Wright. Let's move on to some sports stuff, man. First significant thing, I think, is the Major League Baseball talking about opening up, theoretically, and starting to have some type of season starting in July. We've talked about this on previous episodes, and the writing was on the wall that they were going to at least try this. And to me, at this point, I think, a lot of the professional leagues are really, really trying to figure out, you got to play to make money. That's your business, right? So you can't just show old simulations of old games or show highlights and still make money. You have to play. So what are your thoughts on Major League Baseball and this quote unquote mini season that they're going to start?
Well, they had to figure something out, right? And as long as the guidelines are being met and safety precautions are being taken, I do believe that, everyone wants to work, right? And the players want to work. They want to resume their careers. So we'll see how it goes. It's like a lot of things here that we're in a catch-22 because this country is dependent on consumption, on capitalism, on generating money. You just hope that pressure is not causing them to take shortcuts and not take all the necessary precautions to make sure that they're safe, right?
Yeah, well, I think baseball also is in a unique position because at the end of the day, we're going to have to start evaluating these things literally industry by industry, sometimes even, locale by locale. Like, what are you actually able to do based on kind of the circumstances of your business to be able to function? In baseball, guys are spread out, so you can theoretically just say not have everybody sit next to each other in the dugout and not have huddles. And you can probably social distance for the most part for most of the game.
Pretty much
that's
6 feet apart. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that in basketball, and you can't do that in football effectively, and even soccer really. So, baseball is uniquely positioned in that regard. They really can, for the players, they really can probably play a whole game and not really come, within contact with people that often.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that works out. And speaking of that, Korean baseball, they actually opened back up. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of baseball.
I mean, they're doing it with no fans, and it's funny. I was reading an article about how sports gamblers are so desperate to be involved with something that there's money being poured into bets on Korean baseball games from the United States. So
that doesn't surprise me.
That's a funny side story there.
People are gonna find their way back. And speaking of back, Mike Tyson released a video of him sparring and boxing with his trainer. First of all, his trainer is a beast. I don't know who would want to do what he's doing. But Tyson at 53 looked fast. He looked quick. He looked like he could get in a little bit better shape, but he looked like he was in pretty good shape. And he says, I'm back. I don't know what that means, but I posted, I was like, I don't think anybody wants to see Tyson, a motivated Tyson even at 53. Maybe I'm wrong, but what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I saw those punches and the question we always ask, how much would someone have to pay you to take a clean shot from Mike Tyson? And I don't know if there's a number for that, right? Like, honestly, even today at 50 some years old, if any of us would want to take that, and, and I know there's one glass-jawed heavyweight fighter from Britain named Anthony Joshua that would probably be scared to fight him right now.
Yeah, you gotta be, man. It's a scary kind of proposition. But I think, I know that he talked about doing some stuff from charity. I saw Evander Holyfield posted something also training because I think he's trying to do something for charity. Maybe we'll see Tyson Holyfield part 3 in a charity match of some sort before maybe, he tests the waters again. But either way, I'm excited to see it. Tyson he was just obviously such a dominant figure in our childhoods, not just from boxing, but in sports in general. And he's just an interesting guy. So
it's also great to see his story from a mental health perspective. Not too many people recover from the fall that he recovered from in the way that he has. Right. So.
Absolutely. Let's talk some basketball. There's a few stories happening in basketball. I mean, obviously we're talking about the NBA. We've talked about that and whether they're going to open up. They're still kind of deciding what they're going to do. There are rumors that maybe they'll open up in like 2 cities or something like that and, still try to have a playoffs and all that type of stuff. And then I believe it was Charles Barkley who said that he thinks that if they were to have a season this year, you would have to put an asterisk next to the name of whoever won in the playoffs. Yeah. What were your thoughts on that when you heard that?
Well, I mean, I do think there is some credibility there, right? In the sense that you can't shortchange teams that went through a full 82 game season and through multiple 7-game series. That's a real test that isn't going to be the same test in this shortened season. Guys have had a couple months off now, to rest and recover. They're going to be healthy. I don't know if an asterisk necessarily, because we had a playoffs after a strike shortened season in all the sports before, but I hear him, but I think it's just Charles again, just stirring the pot like he always does. So,
yeah. And I think, I understand, like, just all championships aren't necessarily created equal, right? So in terms of the process, theoretically, of how you got there, but so long as the format is legitimate, and everyone kind of has the equal opportunity, that's a similar, even if it's not exactly the same, but a similar kind of opportunity to how it normally works, then it's not. There's no asterisk to me. There's a substantial part of the season that was played. To still staying on the topic of basketball, obviously, The Last Dance, episode 7 and 8, just hit this past Sunday, and there were some powerful episodes, man. I think these episodes are kind of the episodes that will determine what you believe about Michael Jordan as a person. He said before this thing aired, the whole thing aired, that he feared that at the end of it, people aren't going to like him or think he's not a nice guy. He said that. Yeah. And I think that these are the episodes that kind of he was probably referring to. What were some of your takeaways from episode 7 and 8 of The Last Dance?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Obviously Michael Jordan, growing up for both of us, he was our idol. And in a lot of ways, and it showed some of the negatives, but it also showed why so many of us admired him, right? Because specifically the baseball story, right? Like the greatest basketball player ever goes to AA baseball and gets destroyed for it, and basically still takes the position, I'm not going to let you tell me what I'm going to do with my life. This is a dream of mine, and I'm going to try my best. And he really did try his best. And the fact that he hit 200 for a season is, people don't understand that aren't around baseball what that at any level, single A, double A, triple A, to hit 200 is an incredible feat, especially not having played for over a decade.
Yeah, I think Francona said they had guys on the team that didn't hit that. Guys that had been playing their whole life, never took a hiatus. So,
and then also the circus around that we create around people to try to destroy them. Like when his father died, the fact that there was zero evidence that it was connected to gambling. Anyway, nobody could validate any of it, but that's the story they ran with. Even back then, it may not be.
I remember hearing that. Hearing that back then. And I was young, so. And
how we were young, and we didn't know what to believe. That was a real rumor that people were believing.
Yeah, it was,
right,
for sure,
because it was an inexplicable death, and how he internalized that situation and kind of used it as a driving force, and kind of coming full circle when they won the championship on Father's Day. That was another big part. And then obviously getting to, this is probably where we're going to talk, like how he handled his teammates, right? It's like he had a reason behind why he was doing what he was doing, but people probably still question, like, you and I know we're not going to just sit around and have someone call us a hoe and a bitch.
Well, that's the thing. And so that's the thing. I think what this thing kind of illustrated was that, and again, we talk about this in other contexts. There are multiple things that can be true, right? One thing is that he was an effective, leader from the standpoint of winning, right? And whether guys were happy or not, you play the sport, and especially professional sports, theoretically, you're playing to win, right? And so at that point, you have to, whatever you have to do to win, you do to win. A lot of the likable figures, or a lot of figures who are winners in history were not likable. Bill Belichick is one. They even Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Those guys were dickheads to their teammates too. So it's not like there's something to that. Tiger Woods, I can't even imagine him as a teammate. He's lucky he's in an individual sport. But there are other types of leadership as well. That even Steve Jobs, for example, was a dick. But there are other types of leadership as well. of people who aren't necessarily like that, who are leaders, who still all figure out a way to get to the ultimate goal. And ultimately, this really just comes down to your personality.
Yeah,
so it's not the only effective style of leadership, but that's just who Mike was.
And it's the reason, there are only 5 teams in NBA history that have won 3 championships in a row. He did it twice. The Bulls did it twice. To sustain that level of winning, we know, when Ohio State won that national championship, how difficult it was for that team to come back and win again, despite being the most talented team potentially in college football history. Like, doing that is hard. And there's only been one team since the Lakers era with Kobe and Shaq that have done it since. So I think it's a study in maniacal desire to win and what it actually took for him specifically to motivate himself and maintain that level of winning. Doesn't mean that's the same thing everyone else needs to do, but that's what he cared about most.
Well, I think also, I don't know if he was necessarily like that at the outset as much as he was once he became a winner. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, I think he kind of learned from Magic, Larry, and Isaiah, what it takes to win, and realized at a certain point that you need contributions from every single person on your team. Yep. So you can't, and he figured out what contributions he needed from every single guy. He would ride guys on his team, particularly because he wanted to get more out of them. But the second thing that I think is, and I hope they touch on this in 9 and 10, but maybe they never will. But even if they don't, this is something that we can kind of talk about on our own, which is the pressure, man.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, and he talked about it a little bit maybe in episodes 5 and 6, the pressure to stay on top because people are waiting for even Reggie Miller said it. He said, I was hoping that I would send him out and I'd retire Michael Jordan. That's what people are coming for. And when you're a maniac like that, that's part of what drives you as well. All the top, Serena, all those top athletes are like that. That pressure to stay on top and not get knocked off the pedestal drives them. It makes them crazy.
And they showed, like, he was making up ways to motivate himself, because it's also really hard not to fall in love with the headlines. When everyone's telling you, you're the greatest, you're the greatest, you're the greatest, you get complacent. Everybody does. And I think that's also kind of what was behind the psychology of him pressing his teammates. He realized that pissing them off was going to be more motivating to them.
Well, the other thing too that I think, and I think some of it was overplayed a little bit probably, because I bet, just like any leader, you don't treat everybody exactly the same. So there's probably certain buttons he pushed on certain guys. I mean, he might have been addicted generally, but for the most part, he probably didn't treat Scotty the same way he treated, Scott Burrell. You know what I mean? So, that's the other thing too, is he did what he thought he had to do. And, it seems like for the most part, besides Luke Longley, who refused to be involved with this, and there's articles about it and all that, they have beef still, I guess. But besides him, it seems like most guys have been able to look back, and they may not like him as a person, but most of his teammates appreciate what it is that he did, because all of these guys' lives have changed dramatically, as a result of being part of those teams. Yeah. So I think they've been able to look back and appreciate it. So we'll see what happens in episode 9 and 10. Obviously, it's the last 2 episodes. I'm so sad. It's like this thing. I wish this thing would go on forever. But this has been exceptional, and I really, really look forward to how they close this out.
Yeah.
One other basketball story that's kind of bubbling right now is Zion Williamson story. Basically, him being sued by a former, it looks like, marketing agent who's essentially outing him, whistleblowing, whatever, basically saying that he accepted money, his family accepted money from Adidas and Nike. And first of all, it's weird that said Adidas and Nike, but essentially to go to Duke. And, he's been served with a complaint, and, they're talking about discovery now. They've actually screenshotted some of the pages of the discovery of the request they've asked them to admit or deny interrogatories, and what they call RFAs, or requests for admission. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on it?
All of these stories bother me when they come out, right? Because it's obvious that we talked about this probably a few months ago with the Michigan State situation. Whoever this marketing agent was, if shady stuff was going on, of course, this is all allegations, you were involved, right?
Right.
And you were happy so long as you thought that you were going to get a benefit out of this at the end of the day. When that didn't go as planned, you're coming out and you're potentially ruining so many people's lives. Everybody who's in that world, in that basketball world, knows the shit that goes behind the scenes, that starts at a young age, that happens with parents. It's not that. It's also, look, Zion Williamson, before he went to Duke, his market value was in the millions of dollars before he went to Duke.
Right.
So the best thing to do is to create a system, and that's where this personal image and likeness thing is going, creating a system in which these guys can actually capitalize on what their market value is. He wasn't your traditional amateur athlete coming to Duke as a nobody. He was, he had a multi-million-dollar brand.
Internet sensation, yeah. And that's the thing, too. I think this thing will always illustrate is, you know, where there's injustice, there's opportunity, right? And so I think everybody knows that you know, there's going to be corruption behind the scenes when it comes to college athletics, especially when you're talking about the big revenue sports, because they know that these guys are being exploited. And so, you know, and then not only that, but there's a lot of potential money on the back end if you're able to get a guy to team up with you, or, you know, to commit to you or to your company in the future. I mean, there's a lot of money on that.
Specifically, when we talk about this from perspective of Zion going to Duke versus going to South Carolina, right? The value that creates for Nike or any shoe deal that he does afterwards increases significantly if he goes to one of the top programs in the country. You know, at the end of the day, I feel like we hold the kid accountable, but it's the system that we need to adjust, not the poor kid who's coming in at 16, 17, having to make decisions when people are pressing him.
Right. Let's talk one more basketball thing before we transition into some music stuff. Let's talk about Kawhi, because, you know, this is, I think this week is the anniversary of Kawhi hitting that crazy shot in Toronto in Game 7. And, you know, just his greatness kind of being solidified a little more, because winning in Toronto was not the same as him winning in San Antonio with Popovich and, you know, Tim Duncan and all these great players. And so he did it in Toronto, and now, you know, it looks like he's going to have a shot to do it in LA. So I guess the question is, if Kawhi gets, I guess I'll ask it this way: what does Kawhi have to do to get into the GOAT conversation? Can he get into that conversation? And if he can, what do you think he has to do to get into that conversation?
He obviously can. He's young enough, and he's talented enough. He is probably the best player right now, right? No disrespect to LeBron or Giannis, but he is probably the best all-around basketball player on the earth right now. And I think the thing that he did in Toronto is significant, and going to the Clippers is significant in determining whether he can enter that conversation for one reason. There are only two players in NBA history who've won championships with three different franchises. It's Robert Horry and John Sally. And neither of those guys were the alpha on their teams, right? Obviously. To be the guy that brings the Raptors organization their first championship and potentially brings the Clippers their first ever championship is a big deal. Like, one of the reasons that Jordan gets so much credit is because the Bulls had never won before he got there. They never won anything. They were terrible, right? So there's obviously organizational support and everything. So, you know, he has 2 rings right now. If he gets one more with the Clippers, he enters the conversation, right?
So here's the thing that I think that argument about winning with multiple organizations is just, it's an overstated, it's kind of a silly argument, because, you know, for example, let's just take Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, put him on the Knicks, put him on the Pacers, put him on the Bulls. He was going to win. So if free agency was different back then and he was just moving around the different teams, he would have won with 10 different teams or 6 different teams. I mean, he was just that good. So circumstances have kind of created the fact that these guys are playing on multiple different teams for their career, right? And then the other question you have to ask is just generally the composition. What's the composition of their team? What's the composition of the league? Are they lifting competitive teams, or are they taking, the last place team that has no talent on it at all and having them win, you know what I mean? And then just the landscape, like, for example, again, just to put Kawhi's championship, this is not questioning his greatness, but to put his championship in perspective, he also defeated a Warriors team that, their guys were hurt. Durant was out. Clay got hurt. Not saying they couldn't have won that way, but that's, again, circumstances, right? So again, when you're talking about the GOAT thing, it has to be, you do have to narrow it down a little bit and kind of nitpick a little bit. I think him.
I don't
I think
agree
him winning
with
his
you.
third chance.
I don't agree with you for one key reason. Like, to go to different teams and immediately go from where the Raptors were before to where they became, which were in the finals.
LeBron did that. I mean, all the greats could do that.
But LeBron again, who was his second best
Cavs won
player in
18.
Miami?
They won 18 games
Who
before
was
they
LeBron's
came back to
second best
Cleveland.
player
I'm
in
talking about
Miami?
Cleveland.
Who was his second best player in Cleveland?
When he came back to Cleveland?
Third best player. When he came back to Cleveland. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. Like, I think what we have to acknowledge with Kawhi.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
With Kawhi Leonard,
the Clippers didn't
like,
have Paul George. They didn't have Paul George before Kawhi got there.
It often takes time to build chemistry. Jordan, it took him years and years before that team was good enough to be able to go from one team.
No, it took him getting Scotty. If you want to talk about composition, it took him getting real players that could help.
It definitely did. It definitely did. But it takes, like you said, even when LeBron went to Miami the first year, if Kawhi immediately goes to Toronto in their first year, wins a championship, and then he comes to the Clippers, beats LeBron and Anthony Davis, and then beats Giannis in the finals, in back-to-back years in his first year with a new organization, they win championships. That's unprecedented. That's never been done.
It's unprecedented because guys never had to do it. I'm telling you, Michael Jordan could have done it. Larry Bird could have done it. Magic could have done it. All the great players could have done that. That won championships.
It puts him in the top 10 conversation. But
for sure,
I think if he wins 2 rings with the Clippers and ends up with 4 overall, then he's seriously a GOAT candidate, right? I think
he has to win. So to answer the original question, which you kind of just answered, my answer is that he kind of has to win. It can't just be one more, right? He has to win at least 2 more in convincing fashion. Because again, you have to also look at, one of the things that you look at when you're talking about GOATs is you look at who is the competition, who are their teammates, all those different, what are the circumstances. You have to, just in the GOAT argument.
Yeah.
And when you evaluate the GOAT argument, it's a narrower argument. So when you look at his championship in Toronto, it was exceptional. But again, who did he play in the finals? He played a wounded, great team. That's not the same as beating a 64-win Supersonics team or a 73-win Golden State team. It's not the same, So he has to get in that conversation. He has to really do it probably 2 more times and show us that he can really overcome the greats.
Again, if you want to put an asterisk next to his championship last year, if he comes in,
it's not an asterisk. It's not an asterisk. I'm just saying it's context versus.
If he comes into LA with an exceptional team with the Lakers, with 2 of the top 10 players in the league, and
that's what I said.
And the Rockets with 2 of the top 10 players in the league, and does it back-to-back years, that is 100%. A very significant accomplishment, right?
I agree. I said that 2 more like that. But context is also going to matter,
Yeah.
So I guess we can move on from that because that's something that's still developing, and hopefully they do have a season this year because I really don't want this season us to be cheated out of what was potentially setting up this season, which was Los Angeles versus Los Angeles finals or Western Conference finals. And then, Los Angeles versus Giannis finals. I mean, that shit is epic right there. So I pray that happens. Let's move on a little bit before we get out of here on news and notes. Let's talk a couple things about some music. The Verzuz battles. Erykah Badu and Jill Scott had theirs last week. They had almost 700 or over 700,000 people that had tuned in. At first it was different. First of all, I appreciated their battle because it was different. It was like a love fest, right? In a lot of ways. Yeah. It was, they were basically just showing each other and telling each other how much they admired each other and telling stories and about how they got involved in the business. And it wasn't, competitive energy, so to speak, even though it was a quote unquote battle. And then it was also a history lesson, man. I feel like I learned even things I didn't know about songs that Jill Scott had written, or where they were, or who influenced them. I tuned out for a second, and I came back, and I was able to finish off and see the end, and I loved it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was different. The energy was actually definitely like, on some chill, smoke your weed and
right.
and chill type of thing. But I think appreciating both of them, and then also understanding the impact that the two of them have had on women, specifically women of color, that cannot go underappreciated or unrecognized. And I think for more than anything, that was a very powerful aspect.
Yeah, it was great to see just two, powerful, talented, women that had such influence, supporting each other like that, and then also taking us down memory lane. And the next Verzuz battle is supposedly going to be Nelly versus Ludacris.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I think you were the one that told me that. I was trying to think, like, what are they going to include songs they're featured on? Are they going to include, songs of artists that they had brought, under DTP and Nelly and, like Chingy, I think Nelly found, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but this sounds like a battle Ludacris can win. I think he has more hits for more years than Nelly does.
Probably for more years, but I mean, Nelly's first two albums, you got to remember Country Grammar, when that hit, it sold like 10 million records,
Right, but there weren't that many hits on that album though, right?
Yeah, there were. He had 2 Billboard #1s on that, on that.
I'm saying it wasn't like a DMX or like 50 Cent album or Jay-Z Blueprint where like 10 of the songs were hits.
When Nelly was a pop star amongst those guys. Like his music translates globally.
But how many hits does he have is the question. Does he have more than 10? Does he have more than 10?
He has a ton. The thing is, we're so far removed time-wise, he probably has at least 10 big records, right? And I think what we have
enough features and stuff
enough features we have to remember is that for a period, nobody's career maintains and sustains. Very rarely, I'm sorry, there are cases, but you have to evaluate them from the period of time that they were in their prime. And when these guys were in their prime, what I really like about this Verzuz battle is you have to really know your music history. I know you're a huge Ludacris fan.
Yeah.
When Nelly first came out, I'm
a big Nelly fan too.
Yeah. And I think that's what this Verzuz battle does, is it's going to be a reminder for people of how talented these guys are. I think as far as actual rap talent, Ludacris is one of the most underrated probably rappers of our lifetime, I would say.
100%. And he says that. And I think he actually has a Grammy or two, but not that that's the measuring stick, but he's definitely one of the most underrated rappers because first of all, you talk about longevity. He's had excessive amounts of longevity, all different types of hits in different decades. Excuse me. And then just a crazy influence and a style that's very unique. So I'm looking forward to this one. And like you said, these battles are awesome, man. At first, it was kind of just, this is a cool thing that's happening, and now it's actually turning into like literally a cultural phenomenon. And for our age group and people who kind of lived through that, it's history. It's like a history lesson. It's like watching the Jordan documentary in a lot of ways, right? It's like taking us back through the great times that we grew up and re-exposing us to things that we had already seen. So we'll see what happens with that one. And then the last thing for news and notes is kind of more of a pop culture thing. Drive-in theaters, they're making a comeback, and obviously due to the pandemic, regular movie theaters aren't open the way they used to be, and so it's an opportunity for drive-in theaters. And I've seen drive-in strip clubs. There are all kinds of drive-in stuff happening. But what are your thoughts on drive-in theaters? Is that something that interests you, or is that something that has staying power, or is this just a little fun fad?
I mean, I think everything that's old becomes new again, right? And we see that with fashion, we see that with culture. There's this feeling with sneakers. I think that it's there's something unique about that experience. I don't know if when you were a kid you went to a movie in the drive-in, but it's a different experience, right? Than going to the theater. It's very personal. Whether it's you're on a date or with your family, it allows you to be in your own bubble, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like we're moving more toward that generally right now with what's going on with the pandemic, to create a way in which people can still enjoy that experience safely is something I'm always going to be for. And I don't know if it has staying power beyond this virus, but it is kind of a neat solution to a challenge we're facing.
Absolutely. So we'll see. I'll definitely check it out, at some point. I think it'd be a cool thing to do, but I don't think it's something that I would do consistently. But, a lot of things, like you said, a lot of things are going to change. Things have already, new businesses are emerging, and new businesses and new opportunities are going to continue to emerge. So it's important to kind of stay at the forefront of that, whether you're a business person or a consumer, to kind of understand how the next life is going to be post-COVID. That's all we have. All we have for news and notes. You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. Shout out to Premier Podcast for getting us set up with our podcast during this quarantine period. Make sure you guys check them out for all of your podcast needs at premierpodcast.com. And make sure you check them out on social media at Premier Podcast. That's all we have for today's show. Big thanks to our guest, Austin Mack. Thanks to everybody for listening. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Subscribe to the Pilot Boys podcast on Apple, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube. And please follow us on social media at Pilot Boys Pod on Twitter and at Pilot Boys Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And follow the host on Twitter. I am at Mechadon Music, and V is at Viswant. And don't forget to grab some Pilot Boys wristbands at shop.pilotboys.com.
Always remember, be you. You is fly.
Pilot Boys out!